Welcome, and thank you for joining us for this webinar presentation. We are the Defense Systems Information Analysis Center, or DSIAC, one of 3 IAC domains in the DoD Information Analysis Centers operating under the Defense Technical Information Center, DTIC, within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. Our informative webinar series highlights current and emerging research and technology developments. It presents an opportunity for accelerating the DoD's leverage of these advancements by increasing awareness and fostering technical collaboration. DSIAC serves as one of the premier information research partners and curators of technology advancements and trends for the defense systems community. As such, our organization supports those working in the defense systems domain of DoD research and engineering. We do so by helping navigate the vast landscape of scientific and technical information, allowing our customers to get a head start on their technical projects. With an understanding of the defense systems DoD research and engineering landscape, we provide research and analysis services. We help unlock access to information, knowledge, and best practices from government, industry, and academia to stimulate innovation, foster collaboration, and eliminate redundancy. We hope you enjoy this webinar presentation and that it serves as a catalyst for community collaboration and improved DoD defense systems research.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Taylor Knight, and I will be your host for today's webinar. I am the technical lead for Defense Systems Information Analysis Center, and we are going to get our slides queued up. If you can just bear with me for a quick second. I have Ken Poe on the line. He is going to be sharing slides with you, and we're going to get those queued up. So Ken, go ahead and see if you can share them while I go over some housekeeping notes. Again, thank you so much. We have a great webinar today, going over Indian Head's Battle Lab Division. Before we kind of get started and we'll get the slides pulled up, I wanted to let everyone know that if you experience any technical difficulties, this is being recorded. It will be put on our YouTube channel, which will be on the link that I will share in the chat for everyone on our website. So you can always view it at your own discretion and at your own time. Also, at any point, we encourage you to please enter any questions you have for Mr. Ken Poe in the Q&A section. So there is a chat section and a Q&A section. The chat, if you have any difficulties with technology or things of that nature, you can kind of let me know as well. But there is, if you look in the right-hand corner, there is an ellipses. If you click on that, it will pull up the Q&A section, where you can answer any questions that you have. At the end, once Mr. Poe is finished presenting, he will go over any questions we have. We'll, as much time as we have left, we'll try to squeeze in all the questions that come up. So usually we have about 15 minutes or so for those. Let's see, I saw the slides recently, but they just went away. If you want to bring them back up, Ken.
Yep, trying to get the screen full here. Give me 1 second.
That's okay, no, take your time. So go ahead. What I'll do is I will, I'm going to read Ken's bio and then we'll get started. So Ken Poe is the acting director of the Naval Surface Warfare Center Indian Head Battle Lab Division. He's held several positions at NSWC IHD, including mechanical engineer in the Explosive Ordnance Disposal, or EOD, Research and Development Department, a project manager for Next Gen EOD Counter Radio Controlled Improvised Explosive Device Electronic Warfare, or CREW, systems. He's been a Navy lead for the Joint Crew Analysis of Alternatives, the section head for the EOD Research and Development Department CREW section, an EOD Science and Technology Director, and a customer advocate for EOD and CREW applications. He currently holds 2 U.S. Navy patents on EOD equipment. And throughout his career, Mr. Poe has worked on multiple EOD research and acquisition efforts to field technology for the Joint EOD Force. He has supported the development of science and technology projects for the EOD Force, and he's overseen a $120 million annual portfolio of EOD and CREW programs. He holds a BS in Mechanical Engineering from Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. So we are very excited to have Ken Poe with us. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to you.
Great, Taylor. Thank you so much for the introduction. And good afternoon to everyone. And again, thank you for dialing in and listening into this presentation. As Taylor mentioned, my name is Ken Poe, and I'm with the Naval Surface Warfare Center out of Indian Head, Maryland. If you're not familiar with our organization, we're about 30 miles south of Washington, D.C. My Warfare Center is one of 10 warfare centers under the Naval Sea Systems Command, or NAVSEA COCOM, located at Washington Navy Yard. And my Warfare Center, the big Warfare Center, Indian Head, we're really known for two things. We are the Navy's arsenal for energetics, and we're also the EOD Technology Center for the Department of Navy, which has a mission to provide joint EOD capabilities to the U.S. forces. And that's where I reside under the EOD department with this Battle Lab group. And that's what we'll be highlighting today. Before I get into my slides, just I really quickly want to acknowledge one individual, Miss Catherine Eaton. She was the first division head of the Battle Lab that we started several years ago. And again, basically this organization I'll be briefing today. She recently took a different position up at the Navy Yard, so made it very simple and easy for me to walk into this organization. Proud of the group here and happy to go over it. But again, want to recognize her for all the excellence and things she did to stand up this organization. So with that, I'm going to go into my slides. So I'll go to my next slide here. And really, I'm going to set the scene, I'm going to ask everyone to kind of go back about 20 years in time, if you're able to. Not sure of everybody's age. But, you know, I started in the government in 1996. And so when I go back to the early 2000s here in my career at Indian Head, you know, I think about what was the state of the technology then. You know, slow internet. Again, I remember having tens of kilobytes a second of data and thinking that was really fast. Similarly, you know, our smartphones, you know, we didn't have the ability to get on the internet and do all the great stuff we do now. The real reason behind that was just to kind of set the expectation of what was the capabilities of technology back then. And how does that kind of relate to where I'm going with this is in terms of thinking about that for providing skills and capabilities to our warfighters. Again, my department and my career was focused around EOD for, you know, the first half of it. So in terms of that, but really when I go back and think about that time frame, you know, my first acquisition project was 1996. It was a 4-year program, and we fielded a capability out of that. It was successful. And when I think about it now, working those 4 years of that program, I don't recall anyone really complaining, at least at length, about how long it took to field equipment. So obviously everyone hopefully on the call is familiar with the DoD acquisition process. And you know, it does take time, but I guess going back to that time frame, at least from my perspective, is, you know, versus what I see now, is there wasn't a heavy demand to get stuff done faster. We had an acquisition program, and then it would work and field the capabilities. Obviously, acquisition programs, I mean, the milestones and timelines are still similar, but what's really changed over the last 20 years, in my opinion, is the ability to get that information out. You know, we can take a picture on our smartphones, I can send it to my work email, and I can send it to someone to explain something today. In the past, that wasn't always the case. And so it really is a function of just how we've progressed over the last 2 decades. And again, setting the scene for what the Battle Lab does. Just some of the photos you see there in this slide, I'll kind of pick on the V2, that's the laptop you see on the right, what I call a laptop. That was one of our first expeditionary remote computer systems for the EOD community. Again, ruggedized laptop. I think maybe it had 16 megabytes of memory total for what we were trying to do. So just again, to build that visual of, you know, how things have progressed over the last 20 years in terms of, you know, the capabilities that are fielded to our operators and the speed of data and technology. My next slide, again, where did things really start to change, at least again, from my perspective and overall where the Battle Lab, we saw this capability really starting to turn where we could see the opportunities. Again, everyone here, obviously September 11th, we know what happened there. But specific to the threat. So again, kind of going back to my timelines. And so I'm a little bit older, but my first exposure to an improvised explosive device, or what we call an IED, was actually from the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia, the Centennial Park bombing that occurred, where again, unfortunately, there was a fatality. That was my exposure in my job to what an IED was. And that really didn't change for several years. We responded, the military, wanted to have the same capabilities to address that kind of a threat. But as many of you probably realize, when we got into Iraq and then eventually Afghanistan, the threat to our operators became much more asymmetric. It exponentially grew overnight in terms of the threats and hazards that we were seeing. And again, if you can imagine that Centennial Park IED scenario, we had capabilities for that in the EOD community. But as we got into this much larger fight in Iraq and in Afghanistan, those threats, the challenges, the ability to detect them, to diagnose them, to render them safe or neutralize them, again, focused around EOD applications, but obviously that was tied to the larger fight. Those capabilities didn't exist. And so, again, a lot of casualties, a lot of challenges occurred during that time frame. So as this threat started to morph and what our US forces had to deal with, we started to see this need for where these new threats were driving this desire, requirement, if you will, to get new capabilities out there. And so there was a response by industry, by the commercial market to do that, to get them out there. And so that's good, right? We had to respond to support our warfighters. What we also saw, and again, I was firsthand involved in a lot of it, again, in my position here at Indian Head with the EOD forces, is things were moving so quickly that all of the traditional evaluations we might do under an acquisition program, weren't able to occur, primarily because of time frame, but in some cases, things were just moving so fast, there wasn't even a question of whether or not this has been tested in a realistic environment, or were all the facets tested. And so again, just trying to build the momentum of what are the opportunities that we've seen over time with the Battle Lab. And so again, just kind of setting the stage, as this threat went asymmetric and changed, it did really shift how the Department of Defense changed looking at acquiring things to respond quickly to our war fighters, get them capability. But again, with abbreviated timeframes, there is an impact in terms of the robustness of what needs to be done.
Hey,
So a couple of
real quick, sorry, I have a few people that are saying the slides are a little bit difficult to see. Is it possible to put them in presentation mode by any chance?
Yep, Taylor, what I need to do, I'm gonna have to stop sharing. I think I'm sharing the wrong screen.
Sure.
So if you can give me 1 second, let me do that, and I'll pause 1 second. Yep.
Yep, I appreciate it. Thanks for letting us know, everyone.
Yep. All right, so. Screen.
Okay, we see the browser coming up. There we go. That looks a little bit better.
Yep. Okay, it's a little bigger. I'll see if I can make it a little bit
so
bigger
much
for the audience. Yep. Okay, I don't want to spend too much challenge here. Is that better for everybody, or are we still a little bit too small?
No, it's definitely better. It's in the it doesn't show like the ribbons and everything of PowerPoint anymore. So I think you're good.
Okay. All right, we'll run with this. And yeah, thank you for that. Sorry about that little technical thing, but we're good to go. All right. So again, kind of building on that momentum about the threat, some specific examples that we saw, and these are more general examples to avoid classification issues, but they're part and parcel to some of the things that, again, we saw that, again, drove us towards this Battle Lab capability. So, example number one with our military EOD community. And again, this is a group that, again, we're very close to here at Indian Head. We had these roadside bomb scenarios, vehicle-borne IED scenarios. Their existing kit had capabilities, their tools and equipment, so they could detect the presence of explosive. That's good. But what we realized as this threat became asymmetric and was changing is we needed additional information like on what type of explosive is in it. And in some cases, that type of tool or equipment did not exist. So users came forward to us and said, I need to be able to do this. Okay, but in some cases, the exact equipment they wanted didn't exist in a format that they could use in the field. So it needed some sort of development. And long story short, that meant there was a long timeline. So just one example of, and again, this is common probably across many military, operational, folks, is that, yeah, equipment just wasn't there, it didn't exist. So one example of a common theme we saw. Second one, and again, I'm a Navy organization, my priority is Homeland Defense, but from the second example where we call it the related communities, physical security, anti-terrorism forces within the United States, border security, again, they're part of the Homeland security aspects, which again, really grew after September 11th. But again, they had similar kind of challenges and issues where then they may see some of those asymmetric threats that came out of Iraq and Afghanistan. They don't have the same equipment and capabilities as the US military. So in some regards, they were using sort of older equipment or, not even the modern equipment that was available to them. So what they had in their hands today wouldn't meet the operational need. And so they were looking for information. And again, we had contact with those organizations to go, hey, we're seeing this, but we don't have the big DoD budgets. What can you help us with? So we saw that. And then the last example, more in the local law enforcement, again, same thing, the Homeland Security aspects, is again, September 11th, really changed some of the ways when we go to concerts and big events, sporting events, a lot more security, a lot more inspections required. And in some cases, folks were going to Google to say, hey, I need a capability to do this. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, they might buy a system relatively quickly based on that kind of information. And in some cases, all the information they may need to make a decision on procurements or full implementation wasn't available. So in some cases, they got things out the door that just didn't perform as expected. Again, I think these are probably common across a lot of the military needs, that we support. But again, it started to build this case for like, how do we help solve this problem, at least specific to the EOD physical security folks, but we also saw this having broader applications across the DoD at large, again, as well as the US, border security and homeland security type aspects. Okay, oops, next slide. Oh, gotta go use this. Next. Okay, there we go. All right, so to kind of further decompose that a little bit more, again, summarizing those key user experiences. So again, long wait times for equipment. Again, the solution didn't exist, or what existed today wasn't going to address their threat. In cases where the equipment didn't meet the operational needs, is either they didn't have the ability to get new tools, or they didn't even know there were newer tools out there, or they just were using what they had and trying to force fit it to apply to them. And then that third application where equipment didn't perform as expected, in a lot of cases, it was just the information didn't quite get to where it needed to get to. And so in some cases, and again, an example I always like to use is with ground penetrating radar systems, GPR systems, there was a big need to get equipment like that out there to detect those buried IEDs that our forces saw, which is good. And so equipment was developed to do that. However, what really didn't get captured was, in most cases, our US forces were going to be in a very heavy electronic warfare or jamming environment. Well, that has a negative impact on GPR systems. So because that requirement wasn't necessarily understood, or there was just no testing done, equipment was pushed to theater, good, but as soon as the users tried to use it in an operational setting, it wasn't able to do its job. And so again, that disconnect information, things got pushed through without, again, all the questions being asked. Again, and not anything nefarious there, but just lessons learned, if you will. So what are some of the key takeaways that we kind of distill these down to? So the first one, again, that acquisition times are long. Yep. And in cases where you need S&T as well, that can even add to that acquisition timeline, because obviously you need to do that S&T development to develop a capability. Then you go through your acquisition programs to make it more robust. Secondly, some of the requirements that just were being developed, they didn't get the outcomes they were looking for. And so part of it could have been just miscommunications. Maybe the requirement wasn't fully fleshed out, or simply it just was not understood or captured properly. And then the third piece that we really see as part of that too, and again, I'm fortunate to be at an organization where I have military EOD technicians sitting across the street from me. It's getting that early involvement, getting that early user buy-in, and potentially catching things that I may not catch because as an engineer, I'm not necessarily looking at all the aspects of it. I'm looking at more the technical. And so what we saw is that, and this may be familiar for a lot of people, is getting that user input early on while you're developing capabilities or assessing them is critical to ensuring that when you're done, you've addressed that capability. So continuing along that, where the Battle Lab really started and where we started to see the opportunities for us in this construct under the Battle Lab. So again, those were the three things we identified. And so from our perspective, how do you address that? So again, for the long wait times and for new equipment, what can we do? What can Indian Head offer, the Battle Lab offer to help either look at technology solutions to get them out the door faster, to shorten some of that timelines? And so what can we provide? What can this organization do to help with that? So for the equipment that can't meet the operational need, again, do we need to sit down and better understand those requirements? In some cases, it may need to be that the language needs to be massaged, or just that it's as written, it doesn't quite come across as clearly as it needs to help make sure that technology provides that capability. And then for the equipment, not performing as it was expected, how do we better communicate the capabilities and limitations of that such that we can get that information clearly out to an operational unit so that, again, when it's fielded, they understand the capabilities and limitations. So really, this is what starts this conversation of what is the Battle Lab. And again, the key quick way to summarize it, again, our initial thoughts is that we're an independent assessment capability to look at warfighting equipment and technology. My core group of organizations started within EOD and physical security, but over the years, we've collected capabilities from organizations like the Office of Naval Research, the Demonstration and Assessment Team, which is much broader. They cover basically a lot of expeditionary capabilities for the Navy, for the Marine Corps. And we've since then applied it to other programs, beyond just EOD physical security capabilities. So we kind of have four tenets or four steps, what we look at what the Battle Lab can offer. Identify is number one, scouting number two, and I'll talk more about these in the subsequent slides. Number three, evaluating and assessing, and number four, feedback, capturing that information. So at the highest level, what does the Battle Lab do? Again, providing those objective reviews of equipment and technology that is being considered or looked at by operators, and then we customize that type of information and feedback based on the sponsor's requirements, their time frames, any sort of financial aspects to help, again, paint that picture better of what is needed, what's the mission sets, and then what type of information do we need to get from the users better to understand that. So that's our first real goal of the Battle Lab. Secondly is, again, having that operational and technical expertise, subject matter experts to help steer some of those things. We're very fortunate here in the Battle Lab across the three branches I'll talk to. We have many retired EOD personnel. We have retired Navy sailors. We have Marines. So we've got a very broad group of military users who have experience, including those that were in those in the service in those years in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's very valuable feedback to understand, concepts of operations, how this equipment's going to be used. Of course, we always have scientists and engineers available as well. Those are the technical experts. I've got folks with GPR, cruise systems, explosives, explosive detection, on and on. And again, they're that technical aspect. So when we get capabilities, we look at systems, we've got folks that can give an independent, unbiased opinion of here's how it's performing, here's how it does. Third aspect we really look at is, again, being that advocate for the warfighter. In some communities, again, EOD is a fairly small community, so they have an incredible mission, but they may not have the voice relative to big Navy, big Marine Corps. So we are able to help them communicate their information, get it in a format where, whether it's program offices or technical hardware developers, we can understand that. And then having the technical reach back capability. So again, as users get equipment that we've worked with, we maintain capability and presence in those areas as we can to help us, assist them. If they come up, with a new requirement later on, we'll be able to provide information on the backside of that. So that's an initial push to the Battle Lab. Too far. So again, back to those key tenets there: identify, scout, evaluate, and access, and feedback. That's really the motivation and the battle order we use to look at. And again, answering those three questions again. How do we help get technology solutions out the door faster to the users, or get that feedback so it can be actioned on? How do we better understand user requirements? How do we help them morph and shape their requirements if they're still developing it? Or to better understand, because you asked for this as a requirement, here's the impact it's going to provide you in your systems that you may or may not expect or desire. And then lastly, again, the capes and limbs. That's probably one of the big things we do, whether it's an early on low TRL system or it's an actually COTS fielded equipment that's going out there and it's running through actual operational military user assessments. So again, that's what we look to provide. Oops. All right. So back to those key tenets. Again, that first one, identify. So what do we mean by that? Off the bat, again, threat assessments and threat capabilities, something Indian Head's very good at in terms of explosive hazards. Obviously, there are other threats out there. We certainly can work with our community to help do that. You know, we have folks contacts within the CBR community, but again, just making sure that if we're building a capability or there's a requirement, what type of threats will it look to address? Secondly, under identify is having workshops with warfighters. Again, I'm very fortunate here at my command. I've got a lot of EOD folks I can talk to and walk across the street to, but realizing not all organizations have that. But it really is critical to have that capability to do that. And one thing I take away from all my years of experience is I've met with users many times over the years, but if you don't action and capture the information there and someone's documenting it and following up on the actions and closing them out, you know, the value of those interactions is not as good as it could be. So that's something that we look to help accomplish is we have folks that provide that feedback when we have these workshops and information to look at, hey, what do you mean by your effectiveness requirement? What does it need to do? And if there's questions that need to be answered, figuring that out. And then again, starting that conversation for looking at replacement of capabilities. Again, as you identify gaps or potential, you know, I'll call it the requirements with a little r, are there technologies and capabilities that can address that to kind of give an early indication of, is there something out there, or is this basically, you know, you need your brand new system starting at TRL 1. So identify, we look to do that as part of our Battle Lab mission. Secondly, the scout, we call it. Again, this is where, again, so once we've sort of identified what those capabilities are, what those needs are from the operators, we have folks here within the Battle Lab that can help kind of get some of that initial information provided. So again, the traditional, I'm sure everyone's familiar with request for information, where we go out to industry saying, hey, looking for this, you know, what do you have out there? And using all the mechanisms for that. We also, again, through our partnerships across the DoD, again, we've worked with all 4 military services. We can outreach to our, you know, subject matter experts and partners across the DoD. We also have contacts, again, through various other agencies, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Energy, other organizations that may have relevant experts in those fields. Again, GPR, again, the Army's got a big combat engineer requirement, so does the Marine Corps. So there are some commonalities there. So as we, let's say, look for a capability related to detecting targets, you know, that's identified for our users, we can partner and talk to those folks as well. Talking to warfighters, again, we're very good at that. I know in our community, again, we're very fortunate within EOD and some of the physical security aspects, but getting out to warfighters, having contacts to talk to and get real-time information back on, hey, here's what things we're seeing, and is this what you're looking for? We have the ability to do that. Again, we're heavily focused with Navy Marine Corps capabilities, but in our EOD missions, we do talk to all 4 services, Army and Air Force as well. And then, of course, you know, the traditional things, we're just looking for our international partners. I know we've got several agreements here with the EOD community, as well as physical security, but we have aspects to talk to our you know, our Five Eyes partners, as well as other nations. And again, in some nations, or in some examples, some of these countries have better solutions and technologies that may be available to us. And then, of course, trade shows, other technical communities where we can get out and see what's the latest stuff that industry has to offer. All right, so continuing down that path, so the evaluate and assess, and this is really where we get into some of the key things that we're able to do. From a technical aspect, capabilities and limitations assessments of equipment. Again, you know, we focus a lot on expeditionary type stuff. We've really broadened that out over the years under the Battle Lab construct. You know, our core capabilities here at Indian Head, EOD, physical security, but we've looked at everything from night vision equipment to other robotic applications. So we have the ability to set those up and run capabilities and capes and limbs testing and assessments, if you will. We have a cybersecurity capability. Again, we're getting into this digital age, a lot of electronic equipment. It has requirements for cybersecurity. The Navy's got a lot of things. Having folks early on in the know who can say that system can meet it or that system is highly unlikely to do it, that is important up front. Cybersecurity is a lot of key requirements, KPPs, for a lot of our equipment that we're looking at. And then the technical side goes those technical specification sheets. Again, when products are produced out in the world, someone needs to independently assess that capability. If you've got a threshold for explosive detection, it's good to get an independent assessment and capability of that. So that's the piece on the technical side that we look to evaluate and assess through the Battle Lab. On the operational side, again, we're fortunate we've got contacts to a lot of organizations with military operators, as well as in some of the Homeland Security. We've got access to folks there as well for their applications, border police, things like that. But again, operational, again, engaging with operators and setting up events where you can conduct those user assessments and collect their feedback. Whether it's a low TRL capability or more advanced, it's fielded. I've never seen bad feedback from an operator. Sometimes it's eye-opening. Sometimes you might say, well, they're asking for unobtainium, but at least you get those conversations to go, this is what the capability is. And again, specific to that, again, focusing on mission-based events to evaluate in realistic environments what emerging technologies can do and how it can be integrated into their current operational, their ConOps, their mission sets. This includes in setting up events, in, no kidding, in real environments. Daytime, nighttime operations. We're all over the country at various ranges, working at test facilities, as well as military training environments to host these events. And that's another key aspect we do under this evaluate and assess capability. One tool I'll just briefly mention, and just one thing that we offer, is what we call our EDAT system when we do these assessments. That's our electronic data assessment tool. Again, basically everyone's probably familiar with surveys while you're evaluating and assessing testing with operators. We've completely gone digital with it. We have the ability to customize questions, information, feedback. It's all tablet and phone-based applications. So again, in terms of speed to getting response and having a tool that the younger generation, I use in air quotes, is more familiar with, we've seen this to be an incredibly more effective tool than your traditional paper surveys and things like that. We use this very frequently. It's real time. We can look at stuff, no kidding, the next day and see what feedback it was provided or how it performed. Again, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback when we host these events and use this information. It really does make a difference in how well it's collected, how you can process it, and really look for those commonalities in that feedback, as well as generating something for your end user that says, here's what your end result was from the folks that evaluated it. So it's a really good product we use, and definitely having a lot of success with it. Just real quick here at Indian Head, again, we've got a lot of test capabilities. I won't go through these in detail, but again, for a lot of traditional R&D capabilities, everything from anechoic chambers, we have varied ranges to do our own targets. We do a lot of explosives work, a lot of explosive test ranges. Of course, underwater is part and parcel to our EOD mission, but again, we're seeing more of a demand for maritime riverine interdiction capabilities and tools and equipment that can function in that environment. Again, just a lot of general capabilities we have here. Robotics, we have a chemical lab. We can make and generate energetics explosives here. So just some of the things that we can do locally here at Indian Head as part of the Battle Lab capability, we can access those resources. From a big picture perspective across the United States, so again, Indian Head, we're located in Maryland, but as you can see on this map, we've got locations spread across the country. We've got West Coast and East Coast locations, centered around some of where our key customers are. Of course, here in the DC area, there's a lot of opportunity, but the West Coast, again, around the Marine Corps, folks at Camp Pendleton, we have resources. But again, we've got sites basically across the country we can use. What's not shown here is we've used ranges from anywhere from Texas to Idaho to upstate New York. So depending on the skills or the environment that needed to be demonstrated as part of a technology assessment or user assessment, we have connections basically across the country. We've also done international stuff as well as needed, but again, have folks resident on the East Coast and West Coast in our Battle Lab construct to help facilitate these things and make them happen. So the last piece there is the feedback. And again, I think this is probably one of the most valuable things, that we can offer users, program offices, technology developers. So when we generate this information on whatever we've done the assessment on, getting that documentation that captured all of it is critical. And the first step is, again, from the actual users and stakeholders about hey, do I really have a requirement, or are my requirements realistic based on what I'm seeing as potential technology solutions? And so it can inform requirements development. Similarly, from the acquisition perspective, if you've got requirements and you've got a system you developed and assess, you can look at those requirements and go, did this technology meet that, which can enable a prudential production decision or procurement decision. For lower technologies, again, that technical result feedback can go back to informing the folks who are looking to champion the science and technology. Is, am I asking for unobtainium, or am I trying to develop something that is mature and that I have a reasonable chance to develop in a timeline I want to look at? And then again, giving actual assessments back to operational folks or developers of technology to go, how did my system do? Maybe it did exactly what we hoped it would. That's just good. Maybe there's feedback about, hey, it worked here well, but you could tweak it a little bit here. Or in some cases, like, hey, for this application, it really didn't work, and here's why we think why. And so that's incredibly valuable from all my years of experience to give back to folks developing the technology. Here at Indian Head, I'm not as focused about being a manufacturing of technology place, but helping assess that capability and getting it out there. So just a quick snapshot there of how we've looked at it. Again, this information, for at least from our specific side from EOD, we can load it into some of the various EOD portals so that we can share that with our user community. And then we also look at doing what we call tech look reports, where again, it's more of a synopsis of a broader effort we did, sort of the elevator speech on like, hey, here's a particular system or technology we assessed. Here's what we got out of it. If you've got additional questions, let us know. And we're generally happy to share those, with our sponsors' permission to folks so that they could leverage and take advantage of that. So kind of putting it, so what's a real example of what Battle Lab does? And so the example we've got here is what's covered as our Battle Lab Technology Expo. This is an event we started a couple of years ago where basically we bring in a collaboration of industry, users, agencies to come in and see specific examples of technology that we believe are relevant to high value problems in our DoD mission. Again, some of it's EOD related, but not always. But we physically can host and set up events here where we can have an industry day where folks can just come and present their systems, their wares to the community that attends it. We generally get dozens of organizations, both military operational as well as programmatic sponsors, DoD agencies that are here in the Washington, D.C. area. And they can come out and see like, hey, what's the latest and greatest explosive detection system? Or what's the best X-ray system that industry or folks are working on? So our Battle Lab event, usually has a day where we can do that, but then we'll also have an opportunity to do more of a tactical operational event where we can exercise that technology in a realistic environment using operators to get some feedback. And again, that can benefit the technology developers. It can benefit the operators to go, hey, I didn't know this capability existed, but it works. So maybe it spurns an idea for getting hardware out there, or at least getting that information flowing to where there may be a capability that exists today that they didn't know of. So we did our inaugural event back in 2023, again, showcased a lot of great technologies, a great cross section of folks across the community, again, focused around EOD and physical security. But again, we can always open it up to a broader aspect, again, depending on interest there. We are going to do another one of these events. I'll talk about a little bit more later, but it's coming up this March. We've already started to put together the description of sort of the scenarios that we look to do. We're going to have like a maritime interdiction scenario. So we're going to be looking at some underwater type technologies. Again, usually it's the distro C level here for these type of things. I'll talk more about that. But again, if folks are interested, you can reach out to me afterwards, depending on what your capabilities are or specific user communities to see whether or not it's an interesting event for you to attend. We can definitely follow up with you on that. Oops, keep doing that. Okay, so really quickly, again, the Battle Lab, I've kind of given you the overarching view of what it is. There's 3 branches within the Battle Lab. The first one, the demonstration and assessment team. This is our group of military experts who, again, can conduct those MUAs, military user assessments, everything from S&T up till full-scale developed systems. Their expertise is kind of what I talked about, setting up those tactical events, running the assessments, and capturing all that information. It's a resource that's been around for over 10 years in various Navy capacities. It's here at Indian Head now. I can tell you that this is a group of over 100 folks that can whether it's setting up a night vision scenario or running through, no kidding, live explosive buried item detection. They have the capabilities to do that. The second group is our explosive detection equipment group. This is a community we have here where, again, they focused, obviously because of, Iraq and Afghanistan on just, there was such a desire and a need, and there was literally hundreds of systems being developed for explosive detection identification. We had a capability and resource focused just around that mission set. They still exist today, still providing valuable information to both U.S. military as well as our partners in the Homeland Security areas. And then our EOD technology assessment group, this is where we focus on the lower TRL technologies, again, tied to EOD and explosive detection, but we do have aspects that can look at broader physical security, other applications where, again, you're more in that technology development stage, and you just want to get whether it's just a pure technical test event using energetics, live explosives, or you're looking for some initial feedback with the user community at a lower TRL level. Our ETA folks are capable of doing that. So to kind of start summarizing here, again, I kind of walked through like what really the Battle Lab was intended to do. So those user experiences, what we saw, we kind of took a step back and said, hey, what are the solutions that we can really help the universe with, industry, users, technology developers, program offices, looking at how can we support that? And really what it comes down to, again, what can we do is get information on state-of-the-art technology to drive either acquisition decisions, strategies, requirements, potentially procurement stuff. And we're actively doing that. From the equipment that doesn't quite meet the need, again, we always joke here that we can take sort of the technology geeks and merge it with those warriors and try to get that distilled combination of both. Both have incredible capabilities and resources, but capturing that in a format that both communities understand, it really helps us with the requirements and informing decisions for programmatics and things like that. And then that last piece is that independent assessment of data that can benefit all the stakeholders of a given area. Again, it's those reports that say, here were the scenarios, here's what it did, 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10, and capturing that. And if it didn't work, why, to the best of our abilities. Again, getting that back to everybody is critical. And like I said, I've been around a long time. I've seen a lot of great technologies be assessed, but then if you get an incomplete assessment, within 3 months, people forget. And now you're like, hey, why aren't we using that? And I know it sounds simple, but again, documentation and capturing actions and closing them out, it's paramount to getting good decisions and ensuring that things don't come back around in 5 to 6 years. Again, just another plug for the Battle Lab Tech Expo. Again, coming up this month, again, it is going to be open for military, government, and sort of folks who are in that Distro C, Distro D environment, if you're familiar with that. Again, we're going to be hosting it here at Indian Head. We've got some contact emails there you can reach out to. I said, we're certainly for your government agencies that are interested to hear more about it, I think it'll be easier. I think at this point for some of the technologies, we might be past the point where we could really bring in new technologies, but I can guarantee you that these events are highly successful. We will continue to do them in the future. And so depending on just the specific areas folks approach us with to look at, we're definitely looking at doing more Battle Lab technical expos in the future. I think my last slide is just going to be some of the points of contact within the organization. So again, I'm the division head of the Battle Lab. Anyone can reach out to me. Within the specific groups there, the DAT, I've got several names addressed with specific functions if you're interested. Within our EDE group, I've got the branch head and then the EOD tech assessment group. Those folks referenced there can be points of contact specific to that. Again, three branches here within our Battle Lab, but we provide a lot of capability of the warfighter. And again, I've only been in the position for about 6 months here, but again, coming from where I did at Indian Head, it's been a really good opportunity to see how we can support our user community, get them information, and potentially help other communities do the same. I think that's my last slide. Yep.
Great.
So great. Thank you, Taylor.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Ken. This was very informative. We have a few questions. So we're going to start with, this is coming from an engineer at Vector CSP with industry. Curious about he says, how can we, meaning industry, where can we learn how to help better? Are there things like open solicitations, RFIs, et cetera?
Yep. So no, great question there. The first thing I can say is that, of course, we're always Indian Head's always, particularly for our applications, we're always open to discussing with industry. Sometimes how we've learned about new capabilities is just someone, for lack of a better term, cold called us to do that. How Indian Head does from a technology perspective is, again, we do have through our government agency sponsors. So in the Navy for EOD applications, for instance, PMS 408, we use the traditional, Fed biz ops type things. I know it's a new name for it now, but we will release our RFIs through that. We also do partner with some agencies that can directly work with industry. So for Indian Head, for instance, we have a private party agreement with the U.S. Bomb Tech Association. I know they're very much out there on the cutting edge talking to industry. So if a vendor had a technology, for instance, that they wanted to get assessed or to get some data on, they can actually go to the USBTA and say, I'm interested in getting capes and limbs testing on my piece of equipment. The USBTA, if they don't have the capabilities, can reach to Indian Head, and we can help facilitate providing something that maybe was more government inherent testing capabilities. So the short answer is, yeah, it's the normal spectrum of government fed biz ops releases, BAAs. The Office of Naval Research covers a lot of my interest areas for EOD applications for S&T. And then within the acquisition community, it's usually the Navy, NAVC that would release RFI specific to that. But again, based on these type of capabilities, I would always say, like, hey, I'm never against answering an email from someone that has a potential future bomb suit, for instance. I'm happy to help broker that and get somebody some information on that. So hopefully that helped answer the question a little bit.
Great, I definitely think it did. Okay, our next question is, let's see, do the portals that you put information in, do you also include it in the Special Operation Forces Vulcan tech scouting platform?
That is an excellent question. I would have to get back to you on that one. So yeah, our portal is right now focused around the joint EOD community. So within the Special Operation Forces, I know there are different tiers of EOD operators, but at large, I would say the answer probably is no. But again, if you have a .mil address and you sort of meet our traditionally it's the distro D level of information, we are happy to provide that. And again, I think we, as part of our technical assessment things, we are looking to try to how do we open up that aperture a little bit. Right now, our construct is more focused around the joint EOD missions. So by all means, if there is folks interested in potentially some of the applications, again, from a broader perspective, I think we're happy to do some point-to-point conversations. Again, I can be a contact, and I can definitely help if there's general interest. Hey, I'm looking for information on any GPR detectors you might have tested. So right now, it's probably not as easy to make it available to the group at large, but we're certainly happy to help connect folks for specific interest areas.
Great, thank you. The next question, let's see. You probably touched a little bit on this in your slides, but somebody's also asking, can you, again, just do a brief description of the process of assessing a new technology or a concept?
So it really is going to come down to, again, what's the requirements, right? And whether it's, if industry approaches me, let's say, and says, I have a new explosive detection piece of equipment, there's a series of questions we ask, like, hey, are you trying to detect organic or inorganic explosives? What levels are you looking to detect to? So there's a little bit of back and forth on that. I mean, reality is, certainly, EOD has I'll use that one because that's the one I'm most familiar with. We have specific capabilities and requirements. We're looking at next generation capabilities for being able to rapidly detect and assess an airfield filled with explosive munitions. So think of things like ATR capabilities like that. In that regard, there is work ongoing with the Office of Naval Research right now. There's active programs looking at doing that. So there have been BAAs released, but again, that process is more akin to the traditional BAA. Generally, we need sponsorship of a capability gap to host some sort of, assessing a technology. So the bottom line is, we have specific EOD areas we're actively working now. But in a sense, it's depending on the maturity of the technology. If it's a low TRL, you probably want a benchtop test and assessment. That goes back to the operator, back to the developer or the sponsor and go, here's what it can do today, and here's what you need to look at. If it's a TRL 9 system, we may have a full capabilities development document or CDD that we can assess that, system against and say it met these 12 requirements, but didn't meet these 3. So it's really a function of the system or the technology, I'd say. So it's a little bit open-ended. I'm probably not answering it succinctly, but I'd say, we can follow up on that, but it really is a function of the capability being assessed.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question. How does the Battle Lab capabilities interface with Dahlgren Division's orchestrated simulation through modeling framework and the modeling and simulation toolbox architecture built on OSM?
So good question. I'm generally familiar with that organization, but I'll be honest. So the short answer is probably I'd have to get some more information on that. Clearly there is a modeling and simulation aspect to some of our capabilities, right? So again, my background was more with, I'll just use as an example, with crew and electronic warfare. So it wasn't always possible to go out and reassess a complete battlefield with EME and things like that. So I understand there is depending on the capability, what might be looked at in a simulated environment to get some initial feedback. Short answer, again, I probably would have to get some more back to that individual on that question there. But, we certainly are happy to work with other government agencies, when we're approached, if we don't have the expertise or we believe there's a capability that one of my sister activities within the NAVC environment could help with, we absolutely do that. So more recently, I've worked with NSWC Crane and some of their, using some of their facilities and capabilities. So by no means does Indian Head have to do everything unilaterally here? Just a matter of understanding what's the specific requirement and what assessment needs to be done. But yeah, we are certainly engaged and happy to work with any of the partner agencies across the DoD for that matter, not just Navy, to help answer a question if it comes in that someone else can help provide.
Okay, so regarding the next expo, there's a question, are there any documents or a website that you're able to share regarding the tech that will be demonstrated or the vignettes that will be completed during that expo?
Okay, yeah, so the short answer, yeah, we're still compiling that for this next event. The website doesn't exist yet. I think it will be this Friday, what I just heard. So yeah, it's in process. I think, we're still kind of finalizing the individuals and everything there. What I would recommend for that individual, we answer the question, is shoot myself an email listed here on, at least on the slide deck. Hopefully there you can get a hold of it. And I will definitely link you into that to get more information to you. But yeah, there will be one. It'll be open to the registrants or people that were anticipating coming. So a little bit of a check and balance on that, but happy to include any folks in there that may be working at or interested.
Thank you. Okay, and it looks like we have the last question, one more question. Sorry, I'm going through our chat. Okay. What are the levels of support that may be available to a CBRNE effort?
So again, it really will depend on the level of assessment you need to do. Clearly, if you want to get the hardcore chemical biological, we have worked with folks out at Dugway out in Utah to do no kidding live agent stuff. However, if you're more looking for a simulated environment where you're going to have everybody suit up in their PPE, protective equipment and run through a scenario to see how the equipment, would just work in that environment, that can be done more locally. So again, it's really a function of what's the assessment needing to be done. If you're looking to get no kidding, like for instance, at Indian Head, we can do explosive detection down to various trace levels with various compounds. If you want to get more in the chem bio, then yeah, we typically would partner with our friends in the Army out at Dugway to do more of a technical assessment. But if it's more just an operational, like, hey, can this work in this environment when they're wearing their gloves and protective equipment, that's something we can help with. So again, really more of a specific, what are your interests there? And then I can help follow up on that.
Great. And then we have actually one more at the buzzer. I'll make this our last question. Are you currently exploring or considering options for portable power generation and battery energy storage systems?
Excellent question. So Clearly, stored power energy is a concern for my community. Everything is going digital. Everything needs batteries, and everybody wants it to last longer. I think without belaboring the question here, everyone's looking at UASs, aerial systems. Well, batteries are becoming critical of that. So within the Navy, it is not necessarily under my organization, but I will tell you that we have started to look at specific pieces of kit to see if there are, lithium polymer batteries versus lithium ion. Does that offer an advantage? Clearly, there's some other technical things that need to be considered. But big picture, no, right now. I know the Department of the Army is sort of the stored power folks. I know they've got some folks that do some things like that. But what I would say, if it's a developer, is like we're certainly interested in that aspect. If I can make an EOD robot go from 2 hours to 8 hours of operation, there is definitely interest in that from my community. So that could be one specific inroads, but overarching, to be completely honest, I know the Department.
Your audio for a second, Ken. You lost the audio for the last little bit of the answer to that question. So hopefully you can still hear us. But with that, I am going to go ahead and end the webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank Ken Poe for helping out and presenting all this wonderful information about the Battle Lab. I'm sure a lot of us were not aware of. So if you have any further questions, you can always email Ken. You see his email address on the last slide. Also, if you would like to have these slides and view this again, we will be putting this on our YouTube channel. The link will be added to the webinar website, which has been shared a couple times throughout the chat. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Ken, and we hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Great. Bye, everyone.